past, I've talked about how the story of Pokemon Gen 3, Ruby and Sapphire, have parallels to ongoing social and environmental issues in Japan in the early 2000s, and how those connections were lost on a global audience when the games were localized outside of Japan. Well, it's not just the story of Gen 3 that got lost in translation, but entire features as well. Even though all of these multiplayer features ended up in US copies of the game, a majority of players outside of Japan never interacted with them or saw half of what it was possible to do with the connectivity between games. And much of that has to do with these features being designed primarily for a very specific local audience and the local policies and culture that facilitated linking up with friends and acquaintances easily and often. According to VG Charts, which pulls data from Famitsu and NPD to get sales figures in different regions, Ruby and Sapphire sold 6 million units in North America and 5.3 million in Japan. Please bear in mind that NPD reports sales figures for all of North America, and numbers just for the United States aren't available. For the sake of continuing this comparison, let's be generous and assume that we can attribute the 6 million figure to purchases in the United States, but keep in mind that this is, in reality, a number that is split between the US, Canada, and Mexico, so actual US sales were probably lower. In 2003, the respective sizes of the two countries' populations were around 290 million for the US and 128 million for Japan. So when you break that down, that's around 2.07% of the total population in the US that adopted the game, and around 4.14% of the total Japanese population. Now, that's not a huge difference, but also consider the population density of each country. According to the Statistics Bureau of Japan, Japan has the 4th highest population density in the world, while also being the 9th most populous country. A predominant factor in the density of the population of Japan is that it's an island nation with most of its landmass taken up by unbuildable and uninhabitable mountainous regions and forests. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs states that the total landmass of Japan is 378,000 square kilometers, while the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism's data states that only around 33% of the landmass is inhabitable. In contrast, the United States is ranked 82nd in population density while being the 3rd most populous country. The World Bank Collection of Development Indicators states that the total landmass of the USA is 9,147,420 square kilometers, while census data indicates that 53% is inhabitable. So even without accounting for the difference in culture, statistically speaking, not only were you slightly more likely to know other people playing the game in Japan, but you were way more likely to be located closer together. One of the major selling points in Gen 3 in Japan were the connectivity features. In Ruby and Sapphire alone, you have secret bases and multiplayer contests, multiplayer battle tower, and a ton of content that's only available once you've mixed records with someone. Secret bases, of course, need little explanation. You could choose a base location from the 75 available throughout Hoenn, make it into your home with the TM secret power, and then set it up with decorations that express your individual taste, and display your hard-won battle tower trophies. Once you've mixed records with other players, their bases and the bases of anyone they had mixed with will appear in your game as well, making Hoenn feel populated with people in your real-life community. You can have 18 trainers max move into your game from mixing records and register 10 of them to prevent them from being lost when you mix records again with someone new. Since each time you mix records, you get some of the secret base data of the other game, and that may replace your other friends' bases in yours. What's more, once a day you could battle with them in their base, and whichever team they had when you mixed records with them would be the one that they would use, evolving the trainer house concept from gold and silver into something much more fleshed out and expressive. Each trainer is assigned a class based on the last digit of their trainer ID and their gender. In addition to the bases, you hear about other players' escapades on TV and see all of their cool achievements, and likewise they see yours. The chain effect applies here too. You get the data of everyone the people you've mixed with had previously mixed with, making the game world feel full of the stories of the trainers around you in the real world. There are 6 unique TV shows that only appear once you mix records with someone in Ruby and Sapphire, and 16 more that are available only in Pokemon Emerald. When you enter a building with a television, the screen will be flashing, which will alert you that a special program is on. There's one that will tell you about an item a friend recently purchased at a Pokemart. one that will tell you a recent fishing encounter and catch that they had, one that talks about a recent Pokemon they caught and the type of ball they used, and of course, it will play their recent interviews with Gabby and Ty, the name raider, or the contest hall or battle tower reporters. Emerald's new TV programs add shows that focus on secret bases, Pokeblocks, and shiny Pokemon encounters, to name just a few. And if you mix specifically with another Emerald version, there's even more about the battle frontier and records. Even entire characters throughout Hoenn will change depending on what your friend had in their game. There are 5 old guys who can appear in your new Mauville Pokemon Center, each with a different function. Originally, they were based on the last digit of your trainer ID, but will swap between games whenever you mix records with someone else, allowing you to cycle between all of them the more people you can mix records with. One will teach you a different quick chat word each time you mix records with someone and receive him from another game. One will allow you to give him a secret base decoration to hold that the next player who gets him will be able to take, allowing you to trade secret base decorations between games. One will sing a song you collaborate and write with other people using a primitive digital voice that sounds kind of like the words you chose. One will tell you stories about the accomplishments and statistics of other trainers' playthroughs, and it's truly amazing how many different things the game keeps track of for this purpose, like how many steps you've taken, or how many times you've ridden the cable car to Mount Chimney. The last one, Giddy, is the least interactive, because he just tells you opinions on various things, and you get to agree yes or no to them, and it doesn't use data from what your friends tell him at all. Lesser known are the trio of Pokemon Center ladies, who appear in the Lily Cove Pokemon Center only in Pokemon Emerald. Similarly to the old guys, the one you start the game with is determined by your trainer ID, and you swap these NPCs with the last person you mix records with. One lady will allow you to come up with a quiz to give to another player and select an item in your bag as a prize. There's also several default quizzes she can give to players, which can have prizes ranging from rare candies and Hyper Beam TMs to rare berries. There's another lady who will ask for an item she describes in exchange for a vitamin. You can either give her 5 items in the category in exchange for a vitamin, or figure out the best possible item and give her only one. This one kind of sucks, because she will only take 1 item from you each time you mix records, so it's a lot of work for just 1 vitamin, and without trial and error, it's hard to figure out what she wants. The last lady is a collaborative contest story you and 5 other players build together. She will take 1 Pokeblock from each player who receives her via mixing records until she has 5. Then she will appear on TV having entered a contest, and depending on the quality of the Pokeblocks given to her by the players, her story will have different outcomes, with her winning, losing, or losing super badly. The trendy phrase and Feebas spawning tiles can also be manipulated with mixing records. The trendy phrase in Dewford Hall vaguely controls which 6 tiles on Route 119 Feebas will spawn on when fishing for it, and you can obtain your friend's trendy phrase from mixing records. Each day the phrase in Dewford has a 1 in 16 chance of changing to a new phrase on its own. If you change it manually, the Feebas tiles are chosen totally randomly, so if you manually set the phrase to match a friend's phrase, you won't get the same tiles. However, if your friend has found a Feebas, and you mix records with them to get their phrase that way, you will get the same Feebas tiles as them. In this way, players can work together to track down the elusive fish. Similarly, any mass outbreaks of rare Pokemon currently occurring in your friend's games will be transferred to you when you mix records. This can allow you to obtain version-exclusive Pokemon like Surskit, which is not normally available in Emerald. Multiplayer contests, of course, are another option only to those who can link up. I feel like the contest feature for most people in Ruby and Sapphire was totally overlooked, and it might have been more popular if people were aware that you could do it with friends. They have never made multiplayer contests available on Wi-Fi, unlike every other multiplayer feature in the game, so locally is the only way to do contests with another person. And although it is fully unnecessary to do this, Multiplayer Pokeblock mixing is also the only way to max out a single Pokemon's contest condition, in case you wanted to try to get all the ribbons on one Pokemon. And if it wasn't enough that Pokemon Emerald also introduced tons of new unique challenges in the Battle Frontier, you could also do multiplayer doubles matches in the Battle Tower, or mix records to get each other's high scores in your Hall of Records, like a proto-leaderboard. I imagine that this directed a lot of the play in the Frontier, not only to earn the symbols, but also to continually one-up your friends to see who could get the longest streak in each facility. Fire Red and Leaf Green introduced the wireless adapter and a slew of its own unique multiplayer features. You could enter union rooms and see everyone around you who was also playing, and you could battle, offer trades, or even enter a chat room and type out messages to each other letter by letter. Several of the trading card stars in Fire Red and Leaf Green are also exclusive to reaching some pretty ridiculous milestones in the wireless minigames, which required 3 people with 3 wireless adapters and 3 copies of the game completed up to a certain point to participate in. I imagine in explaining all these features that many of them were things most of the people watching this video never experienced organically playing the game. And if you did know about them before this, it was from reading about them online. Because Gen 3 was just one generation before the introduction of Wi-Fi, really optimal conditions needed to exist in order for large amounts of players to gather and exchange data in order to see these things in-game. And all of this would have been much easier to do if you lived on a small landmass packed with other people. The small amount of habitable land in Japan forces large cities to maximize the efficiency of the space they use, favoring mass transit over more expensive highways for individual family vehicles. Japanese cities also utilize mixed-use spaces for housing, commercial, and business development, as opposed to single-use developments like the sprawling suburbs in the US. Features like mixing records in 2003 could be taken advantage of on one's daily commute to or from school or work, where large congregations of people from multiple demographics were all traveling together on a train or a bus with idle time to kill. And with a lack of infrastructure to accommodate cars, and an emphasis on public transportation, and most importantly mixed-use development, even kids could take advantage of the GBA communication relatively easily without needing to rely on their parents for a ride somewhere. It would have even made things like participating in limited time event distributions easier, like for the mythical Pokemon that require going to a physical location to connect to a machine and download, since the average metropolitan Japanese player would have things like theaters and retailers that hosted these events easily accessible in their day-to-day lives and not far from where they lived. The lack of availability to trade easily with other players in Gen 3 in the US, and the abundance of local multiplayer features made it quite a lonely experience playing it back in the day in the early 2000s. So that's why, one of the things I wanted to try this time around was taking advantage of some of these things using modern technology. During my Emerald 100% playthrough, my friend Ima Blissey was playing through at the same time. I asked them if they would do the multiplayer battle tower with me, and we decided to give it a try. At the time, Blissey lived on the opposite coast from me. If you want to hear how we used the power of science to overcome the hurdles of geographical distance and isolation, visit Blissey's channel for an explanation. Their new video goes into detail on how we turned local multiplayer into online multiplayer in Gen 3.